Hey there, here we are for what will remain as the Chapter 2 material as part of Unit 1 in our basic chemistry look. We are here to, at least in this one, to talk about some of the fundamental properties of water and begin to look at the pH scale and acids and bases. So water properties, picking up right where we left off last time, water is extraordinarily important to living things. That cannot be stressed enough. If water didn't exist, we wouldn't. We are mostly water. All living things have water as part of its makeup. It's vital to maintaining everything that goes on inside of us. So, I mean, that's an understatement. That is critical. It is the bulk of us. It makes up I think, you hear anything from anywhere from 70 to 75% of what we are. And it is the medium, meaning it is where, it's the location, it is the area for all of the chemical reactions that occur inside of us. And we consider it to be a universal solvent because of its polarity. That is really unique. A lot of molecules are polar, and as a result, many things will dissolve. That's what a solvent is something that you dissolve a solute or a material in. So when I take sugar and make Kool-Aid, I can pour that into the water and it appears like the sugar disappears. Well, it doesn't. It just dissolves, meaning it disperses and spreads out as vastly as it can, and as tiny, it basically breaks into each individual molecule spread out evenly in the water, and that's because it's polar too, and it can just whoosh, disperse right out. So it is hydrophilic. We call it hydrophilic, or any substance that can dissolve in water that is also polar. We call those substances hydrophilic. Hydro means water, as we mentioned, and philic means loving. Okay, so anything that can dissolve in water or is attracted to water is water loving. It's hydrophilic. Anything that water repels is going to be hydrophobic. And again, hydro means water, phobic means fearing, so we want to get away from it. This is a huge, important piece of membrane property, and we have mentioned this, but as a little review, we have the membranes are made out of these tiny molecules called phospholipids, and they have areas that are polar and areas that are nonpolar. So this makes them both attract and repel water. Water also has a very high specific heat, and what that means is that in order to shift water 1 degree Celsius, it takes a heck of a lot of energy. So water is very, very capable of storing boatloads of energy. Just to raise the temperature 1 degree, again, it takes huge amounts of energy to do that. So water's specific heat is very high. That's about as far into specific heat as we're really going to get. So all that means is that it would be a huge amount of energy to turn the liquid phase of water into a gaseous phase, which is actually a good thing for us. Water as a liquid is held together through the lovely interaction of hydrogen bonding, and it keeps that temperature from swinging vastly, because those hydrogen bonds, those weak interactions, and remember those are collectively very strong, they will restrict the movement of the molecules. So it allows water to maintain that liquid phase a great deal better than any other type of substance. So that allows energy to kind of be removed as tiny water molecules evaporate away. So it kind of pulls that heat energy away. That's why we like, when we sweat, that's why it acts as a cooling mechanism. Now, anything below, and by the way, we're in science, so we speak the language of science, and that is Celsius, is the unit of temperature that we use. So 0 degrees Celsius is the freezing point of water. So Celsius is based off of what water does. So below 0 degrees Celsius, the hydrogen bonds are going to totally resist breaking from one another. They're solid, and it becomes ice. And those ice form crystals, which we've all seen as we look at snowflakes. And here is the wicked, I mean, I'm not even kidding here, wicked cool thing about water. This is what makes water so unique, and this is why life can exist on either side of 4 degrees, higher or lower, either side of 4 degrees. Water expands. This is a very unique property. So in essence, what I'm saying is water is its most dense. And if you guys remember density from last year, it's how much matter can you shove into a particular space. And the more matter you have, the more dense it is. So it's, you know, mass per volume, or unit of volume. And so water is its most dense, it's its heaviest at 4 degrees. And this is critical for ponds. This is why lakes don't freeze all the way through, because as soon as that water hits 4 degrees, whoop, it sinks right down. And as it heats up, it's going to rise because it's, you know, expanding. And as it gets a little cooler towards the top, it's going to form some ice. And this is why ice floats, because it's less dense than liquid. This is also the reason why frost heaves occur, and that's something we'll talk a little bit about. So it is a really, really important property, and that maintains it so that our aquatic life can survive through winters. And it's also a vital piece of bringing dissolved oxygen back into lakes in the spring. As the ice on the top heats up in the spring, it's going to melt. Well, it's, you know, certainly below freezing, so it's going to heat up, and once it hits 4 degrees, it sinks, and that causes the water to flip and to turn, and in doing so, it brings oxygen and it moves the water, and it's called lake turnover, and that adds oxygen to the water for fish and for other organisms to be able to survive. So it's a pretty important thing. Cohesion. Cohesion is the ability for molecules to resist separating. This is why it hurts like the bejesus to belly flop into a pool. These water molecules resist separating under tension. So you have this cohesion that occurs, but you know, you can just kind of stick your finger through if you have something that's much skinnier, you know, a flat surface. It's like hitting a wall when you hit water. And that also allows for all the little water bugs to be able to ping, 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 right around the top, which is kind of cool. And since water is attracted to itself more than the air, you get this tight packing on the surface, and we get little buggers that can scurry right across. And you know, one of the things we're going to spend some time talking about in the next couple units is the way that water does act as the universal solvent, and what a solvent is to a solute. Solvent is the material that I'm going to dissolve the solute in, and concentrations of the solute to the solvent are really, really important to the functionings inside cells. To give you a heads up, the reason why it's not so good to put salt on a slug, and if any of you were a kid and did that, I'll explain to you why. We'll get into talking about why do your fingers get all pruny when you take a bath for too long. These are things we'll talk about, and it really comes down to the concentrations of solutes in relationship to the solvents. So last little bit, which is pretty important, is acid spaces and buffers, and this is why we're talking about this now with water, is because, again, that idea of the universal solvent. And when you start messing with those concentrations and adding different ions to water, it changes the pH, and pH is critical to living things. Different things have to maintain different pHs in order to keep that stability, that homeostasis that we've mentioned. So we have the pH scale. This is a measurement, hence why the H is capital, because it is a measurement of hydrogen. Measurement of the hydrogen ions that are present. And the P, that's for a very, not terribly complicated, but a negative logarithmic function in math. And we won't get into the actual calculations, you just kind of gotta understand the scale. So here's the scale over here. It is a 0 to 14 level scale, 7 being the middle. This is where you're going to have pure water. It is based off of water, and it is where the hydrogen ion concentration is equal to the hydroxide ion concentration, because occasionally water molecules do fall apart, and they fall apart in equal amounts in pure water where you got H2O, so you got some hydrogen ions breaking away from an OH ion, and that we measure to be at 7, and that is considered neutral. So anything at 7.0000000 is neutral. Anything even 7.0000001 would be considered a base, or 6.9999999 is considered an acid. So above 7, where you get higher than 7 in this direction, that is a base. Anything below 7 or less than 7 is acidic. All right, so our hydrogen, or what we would call, what is a hydrogen ion? It's a proton. So hydrogen ions, are floating around along with the OH ions in the water. So if I throw a whole additional extra hydrogen ions into a solution, I'm going to alter the pH, and I'm going to make it more acidic. So the higher the hydrogen ion concentration, okay, the lower, get this now, the higher the hydrogen ion concentration, the lower the pH number, the more acidic it is. Okay? So there's a big part. That's where the negative math comes into play. Since we are measuring hydrogen ion concentration, you're just going to have to remember it that way. More H pluses, lower number. And this isn't like little change. If I change a whole pH unit, I go from 7 to 6, let's say, it's a complete 10-fold change in the amount of hydrogen ions. So if I go from a 7 to a 5, it's 100 times more concentrated with hydrogen ions. A 7 to a 4, 1,000 times more concentrated. So it's, not just, it's a big deal when you change pHs, especially full levels. All right, so acids, they're going to be your proton donors. They're the ones that are going to be giving up a great deal more hydrogen ions. Sort of classic example, hydrochloric acid, because it does ionize, and you get H pluses floating around, and you get Cl minuses floating around, since it's two ions and the ionic bond holds them together. So if I pour hydrochloric acid into water, I'm going to increase significantly this number and drop the pH. Conversely, bases, typical base, sodium hydroxide, will ionize as well, and I am going to increase the number of hydroxide ions in that water, and it is going to make the relative number of hydrogen ions very, very low. So that's going to raise my pH and make it way more basic. A strong acid can be just as devastating as a strong base. So you usually hear about acids being really nasty. Well, strong bases are really nasty. If you think about like sodium hydroxide, that is the main ingredient in liquid plumber. That's the stuff you're going to pour down your sink to get rid of your nasty hairball, and it's going to dissolve away all the skin cells and the hair, that's stuck in your drain. So probably not a good thing to go and wash your hands with it. Okay. I do want you to take note of the human blood. Human blood sits right about here. So notice, human blood isn't neutral. Human blood runs at about a 7.3 or so. Just slightly basic. And we have to maintain that. Our blood cannot get too acidic. You start getting even to 7, and heaven forbid even be at like 6.9. If you're at 6.9, you're probably in a coma, and you may die. It is that significant. Our window of homeostasis for pH is pretty small, and we'll be talking about why that's so important. So how do we maintain pH? How does our body be able to keep our pH at what it is? Well, we do it through what we call buffers, and buffers are going to stabilize the pH. Buffers are materials that resist change. I could have a buffer and I can dump concentrated hydrochloric acid in it, and no matter what, it won't change to a point. There is a window of that. And this is what the lab, Organisms and pH, is going to show us in class, is we are going to see buffers in work, and we're going to watch how they resist changes in pH, because they take and they absorb and they lock up, if you will, the hydrogen ions and prevent shifts in the pH. So if you start thinking about it and you wonder the question, how do we as organisms maintain pH homeostasis? Let me give you a hint. It's right there. And we're going to look at that in the lab. And once you do that, if you kind of create salts, if you neutralize an acid or you neutralize a base, it's going to create a salt, and that's why it does end up neutralizing it. But we're not going to spend much time with that. So that's really where we are, and I can't wait to get into the lab with you guys. So we'll catch you guys later. Take it easy. Bye.